the Los Angeles Clippers. The biggest absolute travesties of the 2020 NBA season, absolutely pathetic, absolutely shameful, despicable, horrible, and terrible, extremely terrible, losing to the Denver Nuggets, blowing a 3-1 series lead in the worst way imaginable, up double digits each of the closeout games, only to get absolutely destroyed, abused, annihilated, humiliated, and obliterated in the second halves, led by the brilliance of Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray, who was absolutely fantastic, but Doc Rivers, absolutely pathetic, Kawhi Leonard Game 7, an epic meltdown of a travesty, way off P, disgraceful, an absolute double travesty. Paul George was absolutely terrible most of the playoffs, unacceptable standards, he should be ashamed of his awful performance. It seemed like every one of his shots had an imaginary clipboard blocking the hoop, so awful, in half those games you probably wouldn't be able to tell if it was PG or Anthony Bennett breaking those outside shots. Wouldn't you love to have $1 for every brick you saw? I would. How's it going, guys? My name's Wilson. This 2020 Clippers team, one of the biggest disappointments in NBA history, no question about that. I don't want to hear any excuses whatsoever. They deserve to get roasted and roasted and roasted until they put their money where their mouth is. Let's start with the worst of the worst. Paul George, the most overrated star in the NBA, who was so bad half his games averaged just 20.6 rebounds, under 40% shooting in the postseason, just simply doesn't have it, not good enough. If he doesn't change his negative habits, he'll never win an NBA championship. Instead of going straight up and attack aggressively, George tends to avoid contact and take some weird off-balance shots. Instead of trying to look for the refs and complain, trying to sell a call, George should just focus on trying to make a good play. Instead of doing all that extra stuff when a smaller guy's on him, having multiple pump fakes, committing offensive fouls, doesn't have confidence at times, still not a good passer, makes too many bad decisions, has all the skills and talent in the world, doesn't seem 100% healthy this season, but that's no excuse. Getting schooled, humiliated on the court, being a liability early in the Dallas series, not reaching the conference finals, shameful. Since 2014, 4 first-round exits and a second-round collapse, not tough enough, doesn't want it bad enough. After getting sent home by Damian Lillard in the 2019 playoffs, George continued to talk a tough game on social media. Kawhi Leonard left a first-class organization in Toronto to return home so he can team up with this guy. The Clippers traded their whole future for 10 freaking points in the Game 7. I swear, they would have been way better off with SGA and Gallo over PG. No question about that. Gilgeous-Alexander had 19 points in Game 7 versus Houston. George had a dozen bricks in Game 7. The definition of a choke job, a meltdown under pressure, just like in 2018 Game 6 against Utah, going 2 of 16, getting owned by Joe Ingles, to getting owned by Jamal Murray. Now he'll be owned constantly on social media. Stephen A. Smith said he'll be the second coming of Dwight Howard, but PG was never even as good as prime Dwight. Damian Lillard was absolutely right on social media. After calling out George for running teams, even as a second option, he stinked. The player many compare PG to, Jimmy Butler, for years. The debates whether you take Paul George, who's more talented, taller, faster, stronger, bigger wingspan, but there's no debate anymore. The answer's 100% absolutely positively Jimmy Butler. Pandemic P shouldn't even get mentioned in the same sentence as Jimmy Buckets. If George was still in the East, he'd most likely be bounced in the first round again and again. If Jimmy Butler was on the Clippers next to Kawhi, they probably win it all. Just watch their body language, the desire, leadership from one of them, and lack thereof from the other. I won't be shocked if the Clippers move on and trade Paul George in the 2020 offseason, or if Kawhi leaves after 2021, a nightmare first season with the team, PG already 30 years old, his best days seem to be behind him. There is absolutely no optimism at all, very easy getting into his head. George should also leave other players' name out of his mouth when getting criticized. He needs to look at himself in the mirror, be honest about his performance, come back stronger, stop talking smack, and produce. He's no longer a top 20 player in the game. After a horrendous Game 7, George even got roasted by the WNBA. And I'll leave him at that. On to head coach Doc Rivers, an absolutely shameful coaching job, the most overrated coach in NBA history. I am more convinced Rivers was lucky winning his first title with the always Celtics super team. Any coach could have won a title with that type of roster. The first coach to blow not 1, not 2, but 3 3-1 series leads. 2003 with the Orlando Magic, 2015 the classic meltdown, and now 2020 Rivers continues to underachieve with the load of talent he has. I was shocked the Clippers didn't get rid of him after 2017. It was Rivers' responsibility to not let his team down, fail to run good plays. Everybody just relaxed when they were up big. All that motivational pre-game speech, good for nothing if his players can't win big games. His tenure with the Clippers, highly disappointing. Blew a 13-point lead in Game 5 to OKC, the 2014 semis. One of the worst endings I ever seen. Blowing a 19-point second half lead to Houston in 2015. Josh Smith and Corey Brewer destroyed his team, not James Harden. Followed by 3 first-round exits. His guys were hurt in 2016 and 17. 2019, I give him a pass. Losing 6 series, being up 3-2, half of them up 3-1. Absolutely pathetic. Having Landry Shamet guard Jamal Murray and not doing anything to contain Jokic. All these blown leads, unfathomable. Allowing his players to act full of themselves, a double L. It looks like his coaching job's safe for now, but I won't be shocked if the Clippers fire him within the next year. Kawhi Leonard, an absolutely pathetic 14-point Game 7, 6 of 22 shooting, just didn't have it. One of his worst games all of 2020. He had a chance to prove himself as the best player in the league, but not anymore. Had good numbers in the playoff run, over 28 points, 9 rebounds, 5.5 assists, over 2 steals, 49% shooting, still a top 3 player in the league in my opinion. The Clippers might have ruined his reputation if he can't lead this franchise to a conference finals. His Game 7 performance was so awful. People talk about his game being compared to Michael Jordan, but don't ever mention Leonard and MJ in the same sentence ever again. Jordan in 179 postseason games never scored under 15 points in any one of them, and Leonard in the prime of his career having this type of meltdown in the most important game of the season for him, absolutely shocking. With his team's lack of chemistry, Kawhi absolutely frustrated, should never be viewed as an MJ, Kobe, or LeBron caliber player, unless he does have some knee issues for that load management. All that resting in back-to-back regular season games for this, going scoreless in the 4th quarter of a Game 7, brutal, absolutely brutal, terrible way to end the season, absolutely terrible. On to the other players, Lou Williams, who'll be most remembered for getting those wings in Magic City, focusing on getting them biddies, played like tragic pity, breaking NBA protocols, could have easily been suspended the rest of the season, being awful all of the 2020 postseason, average under 13 points, 42.5% shooting, under 24 from 3, couldn't buy a basket, missed many point-blank layups against Denver. It appeared H has finally caught up to him. Terrible on defense, 4 of 27 from deep in the Nuggets series, absolutely pathetic, flirted with the idea of not wanting to play in the bubble, showed what he was made of, now blaming the loss on chemistry issues. He's supposed to be one of the veteran leaders, have a year remaining, $8 million next season. I won't be shocked if the Clippers trade him. Montrezl Harrell, the 6th man of the year, played like the 60th man of the year, horrendous on defense, simply a huge liability on that end, had issues with Paul George, reports getting into an argument Game 2 against Denver, averaged 10.5 points, under 3 rebounds the entire playoffs, under 3 rebounds, playing the 5. Jokic made Harrell look like a child, getting abused by one whiteboard to another, running his mouth, insulting Luka. To his credit, Montrezl did apologize. Doncic responded with a 44-point triple-double, game winner, buzzer beater. Harrell just 2 points. Getting owned, one fat L to another, will be a free agent. His pick-and-roll chemistry with Lou Will, non-existent all of the 2020 postseason. Harrell failed to get almost anything going outside of that. Might have played himself out of some money after a lackluster postseason. Reggie Jackson, hot garbage, one of the worst NBA players, unwatchable and unplayable, more bloopers than good plays, always out of control, inefficient, terrible in all aspects, has no idea what he's doing half the time. Doc Rivers having him guard Doncic and getting cooked every single time should be good enough to get him fired. If he guarded Luka one-on-one for 100 straight possessions, I'm willing to bet Doncic scores on him every single time, in any way he wants to. Jackson provided little to nothing, barely played after Beverly came back. He'll most likely go elsewhere. I won't be shocked if he's no longer in the NBA after 2021. Marcus Morris, Mr. Tough Guy, didn't put his money where his mouth was, telling Millsap to get ready to go home packing. His antics makes him one of the most despised players in the NBA. That moment with Millsap might have cost the Clippers that breakdown of a series. From the Luka altercation, I had a bad feeling about the Clippers when they traded away Mo Harkless, a great guy with no issues, plays hard and good on D. For a hothead Morris, putting up empty stats with the Knicks to averaging just 10 points with the Clippers, the franchise also gave up their 2020 first round pick and a 2021 second rounder. More remembered for his 30 plays, many times caused more harm than good, unlikable, a combined 3 of 14 in game 6 and 7, 12 total points, couldn't do much, inconsistent, unreliable. He is a real tough guy, but when money's on the line, Morris simply not mentally tough enough to dominate games and make big plays, simply doesn't want it. Hides from pressure moments, maybe the stage too big for him, will be a free agent. He is who he is, acts like he's a star, but really just an average NBA player, thinks he's all that. I predict he'll be gone and sign elsewhere. Patrick Beverley, all bark, barely any bite, overrated as a player. Acts like a superstar, pumping his chest, talking smack every time he makes a good defensive play, but at times also causes more harm than good. Roasted by Damian Lillard on social media, and rightfully so. Pat Bev has all the time in the world now to go to Cancun. How about 2 points in game 6 against Denver, under 18 minutes, 6 fouls, ineffective, continues to yip yap and troll, but he's really not as good as he thinks he is. JaMychal Green, very average player, plays roughly 20 minutes a game, okay at shooting threes, has a player option of $5 million, a solid piece. I predict he will opt in. Landry Shamet, a decent role player, but liability on defense, destroyed by Jamal Murray, still has room to grow. Ivica Zubac, just a regular big, playing the center spot. He is who he is, gotta stop picking up cheap fouls, unplayable at times. While Patrick Patterson, Joakim Noah, Rodney McGruder, Amir Coffey, Terrence Mann all mostly rode the bench. The franchise's 50th season, still 0 conference finals appearance, an absolute travesty amongst all travesties. Many of the Clippers outside of Kawhi acted all tough, got a taste of their own medicine, roasted and despised from other players around the league after their loss. Easily the most dysfunctional team Kawhi Leonard ever been a part of, with many questions left to be answered for 2021. This 2020 Clippers team was an epic failure at all levels, with so much championship aspirations, coming up short and short again, taking their foot off the gas, no chemistry, no cohesiveness. After an abysmal 35-point second half game 6, followed by 33 second half point in game 7, disgustingly awful. The team has one more chance to get their act together, otherwise Kawhi will be thinking about his next destination after many terrible regular season Saturday afternoon games. From giving up multiple 40-point first quarters, this team wasn't completely focused, barely played hard in the regular season, thinking they could turn it up in the postseason. Some of the players simply forgot how to play basketball in the bubble. And what about passing up Michael Porter Jr. twice in the 2018 draft? Jerome Robinson, the pick ahead of him. How awful was that decision? I must say, my biggest regret and embarrassment when it comes to NBA predictions, I picked this Clippers team to win it all in 2020. I was wrong. I thought their roster was deep enough, Kawhi was gonna carry PG. I thought this team would be tough enough. My sincere apologies for being such an absolute travesty in my decision making. With 4 teams remaining, the Los Angeles Lakers will now be my pick to win the 2020 title. No question about that. Thank you so much for watching this video. Are the 2020 Clippers the biggest disappointment you ever seen? Let me know in the comments below. I love all of you. See you next time.